Betcher,
Here.
Member Connors, Member Jack Boney,
Present.
Member Maderas, Member Scholes.
Here.
Executive Director Miguel Nunes.
Present.
Legal Counsel Raymond Carcher. Thank you, Vice Chair.
So the single matter on the agenda is that the board may discuss and vote to support proposed legislation for submission to the General Assembly for the 2025 legislative session. The proposed legislation has been attached to the agenda, and I will turn it over to the executive director.
Honorable members of the board, this legislation here before you today is actually not a piece of legislation introduced by the staff. It's actually being introduced to the board by Commissioner Jack Boney. So I'll turn it over to him to provide some background on the legislation.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Sharon. I will just be brief about, hopefully, I think it's relatively self-explanatory what this change would do, but essentially adding two sections, but the important section here is section D, where basically it would prohibit any candidate, political member of political party or action committee or a representative of the candidate being present when the voter executes a mail ballot. And I just want to go into some brief background as to why I think this is actually a modest change, and generally, maybe philosophically, I've gotten some feedback that people may agree with, but I'll go into the reasoning behind it. The first thing is, I think, obviously, if you look at 17-20-23, it is almost devoid of any rules regarding the collection of mail ballots. It's very, and probably by design, designed, it doesn't have a lot of detail. So I think that it's important that we put some basic rules in place and guidance around the actual voting process of the mail ballot, which doesn't take place in a polling place, to protect the voter, where basically none of that protection exists. Just so you know, this is not made up out of whole cloth. I did some research what other states do, particularly what Connecticut does and Massachusetts does. This is taking some of the information from what their rules and regulations are and putting it into here. I'll just mention that I'd say that these additions are modest compared to what our neighbors have. If you look at Connecticut in particular, it's very detailed, but I didn't want to go into that level of detail just yet. I do think that there's additional things that could be added to this, but I think this is the basic place that it's important to start some rules. So let me just talk briefly about what I see as some of the shortcomings here as the law is currently written. Frankly, I think it opens the door for voter intimidation and abuse. It really kind of diminishes the ability for us to safeguard secret ballot. There's nothing mentioned in this, so this is not strictly prohibited at this moment. If we think about the way we handle mail ballots when they come in this door, we are very strict about the custody of those ballots. We've spent, I don't know I wasn't here when we put that equipment in the other room, but I'm guessing hundreds of thousands of dollars on specific equipment, specifically to safeguard the secrecy of a voter's ballot. So it seems incongruous to me that we would not have any rules around the fact that somebody from a political campaign could literally be standing over a voter in their own home. Second, I just think we want to also mirror what the restrictions are at a polling place. In a sense, the voter's home becomes a polling place when they're voting or wherever they happen to be voting that mail ballot. I recall that in a recent meeting, we were all generally in favor of a 50-foot restriction on the early voting locations, and I think essentially to protect the voter and give them some protections when they're going to vote. So I think this does something very similar to that. I think something also to keep in mind is that we've talked a lot about rules and regulations and are they enforceable and how people should understand them. What I don't want to do is two things. One, I know some have expressed that, well, this is not enforceable. Well, a mail ballot when it leaves, gets mailed to the voter and gets returned here, there are rules and regulations around that, all of which are unenforceable. So to not mention something specifically in the law to make something illegal or against the rules, it doesn't, I don't buy into that argument, I guess I would say. And the other thing, I think if we don't have some rules and regulations around this, I think we're setting the bar too high for maybe a civic-minded citizen who might be interested in running for office, but doesn't have the advantage of some sort of machine or a lot behind them. Someone that just may be interested in, say, running for school committee, but they don't, it's overwhelming to think of all the rules and regulations that they have to comply with. And finally, I think, while I won't mention specific examples, I'm sure that the board in their recent memory can think of credible accusations of not only mail ballot manipulation, but voter intimidation and influence that have come up even in the last election. And so the idea of this is to put a basic and very modest rule around the mail ballot vote to protect the voter from intimidation. Thank you, Chairman.
First, before I open it up to comments, I would like to thank Commissioner Giacavone for bringing this up, bringing it to a meeting and actually doing the work with regard to modification and looking at some of the other states. I think some control over mail ballots is a long time coming, but I'll open it up to my other commissioners and see what your thoughts are.
My question was around G, regarding the penalties. Is that similar to Massachusetts and Connecticut have?
It is, and I think it's similar to other sections within Rhode
Okay.
Island state law as well,
Okay.
regarding in the elections, Title 17 section.
And so I'm just trying to understand the part that you mentioned, right? So like some rules and regs may be unenforceable.
Mhm.
And so are you trying with D, are we just trying to sort of boil down what rules and regs would be into that? Or especially, the chairman mentioned of there need to be some other rules and regulations. Are we, I guess my question is, are there any others that need that? I'm just trying to think of, we're saying that there's a lack of rules and regulations around mail voting. And also this is something that we're also expanding and it's still fairly new and we're all trying to, I guess my question is, you believe that this section is the only one necessary right now, or is there something else that you would be open to other advocates including as well, or yourself?
Commissioner, that is an excellent question, and yes, I absolutely would be open to other
Mhm.
modifications and additions here. But after, I'll be honest with you, my first draft was
Yeah.
quite lengthy. But looking at it, I think it was just too much to bite off at one particular time.
Mhm.
So that's why I tried to distill it down
Mhm.
after review from some trusted advisors and people I've talked to, whose opinion I hold in high regard.
Mhm.
I thought that this was a better place to start as opposed to trying to, boil the ocean, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I am open. I think other things need to be added to this.
Yeah, and I'm just trying, so I keep trying to read D over and over. And so just to be sure, for the lawyers in the room and the
Yeah.
person who wrote it, right? So this is basically saying somebody who's a candidate or part of a political party, unless you are a family member of someone filling out a mail ballot, you
Yes.
cannot be present,
Precisely.
right? And so my question is to back to the enforceable part. How are we how can this be demonstrated, I guess? So like, I don't know, you help somebody fill out a mail ballot. How are we proving that you did that? Like, because that's my question, that I don't know if that there's a gap here. I'm thinking also like
Sure.
what this looks like as a hearing at the State House.
I presume you mean me as in,
Yes,
if I
sorry.
was a
Yes,
candidate,
yes.
for example,
Thank you.
helping.
I
yes.
appreciate, thank you.
Well, first of all, right now, if I was a candidate for office, I could literally be standing over somebody as
Yeah.
they're filling out their ballot.
Mhm, mhm.
That makes me incredibly uncomfortable.
You could not only be standing over them, you could be assisting them.
That's true. Yeah, you could really be helping them with that. That makes me incredibly
Mhm.
uncomfortable because I think that opens the opportunity for manipulation pretty severely. By putting this rule in place, I think that discourages that behavior.
Mhm.
Yes, how would we know? Well, this gives an opportunity. Obviously, if that happened now, even somebody could probably report this.
Yeah.
Although I don't think it's explicitly, again, I'm not an attorney, but I don't think it's explicitly illegal if someone said, well,
Yeah.
candidate X came into my house
my
to help
house.
me and they were telling me who to vote for.
Mhm.
Um, the voters, the rest of the voters may not like that, but that's
It's like
not
an ethical
explicitly
thing.
illegal.
Yeah. Okay.
It should be,
Mhm.
because it's no different, to me, it's no different than if you went to vote in a polling place,
Mhm.
you don't want somebody standing, unless
Yeah.
you asked a family member, for
Correct.
example, for assistance. That's obviously a different case.
Thank you.
I would-
Are we going to have testimony for witnesses?
We are, I didn't know if the board wanted to comment
Okay.
first.
I just wanted
We can do
to-
that now if you'd like.
To point out that I did send this to our legal counsel, and he did review this before the meeting, so, so he didn't have any feedback in terms of any of the language, so for Ray Macasio.
Any public comment in this regard? We'll not to outrank you, but we'll start with the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the board. Rob Rock with the Secretary of State's office, and we fully agree with Commissioner Jack Voney that we don't want our voters to be unduly influenced or intimidated when casting a ballot. However, our concern with the language, and I have spoken with the commissioner on this, is that we want to make sure that voters have the full authority to decide who's going to help them with a mail ballot. I think that we would suggest perhaps adding language to the bill that would say unwanted assistance or assistance that they didn't ask for, because I do think that so I can just envision people who are voting by mail and may not have many other resources to help them with the ballot. And I think that there are perhaps some people listed in this bill that could help somebody vote their ballot. And if they didn't, the person would not cast their ballot or not know how to do it. So I think we want to make sure that the voter has 100% authority to decide who helps them with their ballot, but we want to make sure that they're not intimidated. So we would suggest adding either the phrase unwanted assistance or unasked for. I mean, something that would indicate that the voter did not want that person to help them with their ballot. And we're happy to work with Commissioner Jack Voney on language, but we certainly agree with the intent of the bill to make sure that nobody is influenced unduly when they're executing their mail ballot.
So your concern is with the unsolicited portion of
Correct.
assistance?
Correct. I think that there are people listed in this law that could genuinely help someone cast their ballot because the person didn't know how to do it or they needed help with instructions. And I wouldn't want a voter to not vote a ballot because they did not have anyone else to help them but a candidate or a member of a party.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, because as you said that, I was like, wait, who would it be? And as I'm reading, I think of maybe it's my brain goes to like the ballot question advocate. I guess to me, those, for some reason, those seem a little bit different than a candidate, but they could not, they're still sort of pushing something. So, but I agree, actually, I don't, until you mentioned that didn't click on my brain, that even a political action committee could also be iffy, but somebody who's is a advocate or sort of is doing outreach for a ballot question, they can legitimately just be helping filling that out. So I like the idea of adding the unwanted assistance in some part of it, because yes, like we don't want somebody to just, to your point, we had this before, but because if anything, that unwanted assistance sort of answers the question that I had of like, so how can we prove this? Because I think then it's a new layer of, as a voter, I said, I can say, well, Mr. Jack Voney just started helping me fill it out. I didn't ask him for it, but he just did it. So, yeah, and thank you for bringing that up.
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Just before we move on, thank you, Mr. Deputy, for your comments, and I appreciate what you're saying. My concern with the unwanted is that I think the bar is too high, because I believe that asking wanted assistance could very easily move into unwanted assistance, and then we're putting the voter in a very uncomfortable position of being coerced. So that would be my concern about using the term unwanted. So this is a comment.
And you're only speaking of being present while the vote is being cast.
Yes. Again, these
So-
are what I see as
so-
a very
so-
modest change
So
to the
in
rule.
theory, someone could bring someone a ballot, offer them assistance on what should happen on the ballot or how the ballot should be marked in order to get a valid vote, and then leave the room before the voter casts that ballot.
That is an interesting scenario. I mean, I suppose by the letter of the law, I guess if they're not I don't know what we would have to define what present means, but I think, yeah, if they left the room or left the house or left the apartment, then I guess theoretically, no, they're not present.
My thought is, I remember people presenting sample ballots to someone.
Mhm.
Luke, can you turn on your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was on. Oh, you know what, I'm probably sitting too far back. My thought is someone presenting someone with a sample ballot that used to be handouts as you went into the polls.
Mhm.
There'd be nothing in this law to prevent anybody who was bringing you a mail ballot or knew that you had a mail ballot for stopping by and saying, hey, this is a suggestion for you, and then leaving, not physically standing there while you write your ballot up.
True.
Because I think that can be intimidating.
Yeah.
Particularly with some of the ballot harvesters that are out there. And they are paid ballot harvesters. Let's not kid ourselves. But in any event,
I got it.
okay. You got it.
Thank you, Chairman and honorable members of the board. Nick Lima, here, I'm wearing my lobbyist badge today. It was in my official capacity for the Cranston Board of Canvassers, as well as for the Rhode Island Town City Clerks Association. Neither body of which I represent has had a chance quite yet to discuss or take a position on this bill. But I will say, anecdotally, as an election official, I've had one-on-one conversations with many of my colleagues over the years, and there's always a concern anytime a candidate or their agent in a campaign is involved in any way in handling a live ballot or being present when a voter is casting their ballot. Obviously, there's a reason we have that 50-foot marker in a truck line put down outside of over 400 polling places around the state. While elections are a public meeting and candidates often have representatives inside a polling place as party checkers, for example, there's also a reason that if a candidate ever approached the voting machine itself, it would probably tackle them. So anytime a candidate or campaign is involved in that part of the election process, or maybe involved in that direct act of the voter marking their own ballot in secrecy and privacy as is their right that's guaranteed. That is obviously something that local election officials have an interest in. It is something I think we'll be discussing at our next clerks meeting in April in discussing this proposal. But at this time, we have not taken a formal position either for or against it.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I have a few comments. This law, on this proposed bill, says if there's a violation, persons can be guilty of a felony. So that really troubles me, because there is really no objective standards here. It's very subjective as to what is knowingly present. Is it present in the room? Is it present within 2 feet of the person? Is it present in the house? And who should be present? What about the voter calls in the neighbor, help me fill out this ballot? That person is going to be subject to a felony. That is going to, create some big problems. I don't know if the General Assembly will even, pass it out of committee the way it's written because of these problems. Because you don't want to put somebody in a position where they could be charged criminally for something that they really don't see an objective standard. It's strictly subjective. Was the voter going to say, hey, look, he was present. He was standing over there 10 feet away. And he saw me mark. I think it's putting an undue burden on the whole system. I personally think the whole bill has to be, studied a little bit more, redrafted, give it a more thought. I mean, you have Nick here and Rob Rock. We have legal counsel. Perhaps you can all put your heads together and come up with something that's workable, that will be acceptable to the General Assembly, that can be easily enforced, that everyone knows the rules. That's the important thing. Does everyone know the rule? Now, when it comes to voting, and Nick understands, people come to the voting station, there's a bar there. No, only the voter goes beyond the bar to vote. That person can bring a family member to help out, but everybody else is excluded. It's simple. Okay, there's strictly an objective standard right there. We can see it. It's a bright line. In the home, there's no bright line. It is all muddied up. And for that reason, the way it's drafted, I don't think we should consider this. I think it needs a lot more study.
Can
Where do
I
you wanna-
can I add to what you mentioned as well? Because we're talking, so if we're comparing it to, an actual location, remind me, because I don't remember this, do we only allow immediate members of a family, or it can be other individuals? Right? As long as, like, I remember you have to sign an affidavit, correct, right?
It just cannot be the voter's employer or the union
Yeah,
representative.
yeah. And so I wonder, to Miss, to Commissioner Scholl's point, this is also very narrow, because it says it's a member of their immediate family. There are several, like, I remember when mail ballots were introducing this as law. Part of the issue was there are many of us who may not have family members, immediate family members. So again, so how do you edit? Or yeah.
Sorry, just want to, thank you. All good questions. I just want to be clear. If you call your neighbor in, unless they happen to be a candidate or an agent of a campaign, there's no problem. And so just specifically to review this does not dictate who can help you. It's just giving you who can't help you. So unless you're a candidate, an agent of a candidate, or a party of a member, ballot question, everybody else in the world can help you. So it doesn't have to be a family member. It could be a caregiver. It could be whomever you choose as the voter. So just to be clear, it doesn't say who can help you. It's saying who can't help you. And so again, the neighbor, unless they're actually a candidate, won't be a particular issue. And obviously, if Commissioner Scholes has any specific modifications as an attorney that he would suggest, that I think that's fine. I do think, present is not a ultra specific term, but I think if somebody violates this, if this passed and was in law and someone violated it, it would be adjudicated in a court of law. And I think a reasonable person can understand what present means without having to say, well, they were 10 feet away or 20 feet away. I don't think there's a standard. We define a lot of rules and regulations, and a lot of statutes don't have that level of specificity that we could never imagine every specific scenario to
Well,
define.
But when it comes to a felony, you have to knowingly violate. That's the word, knowingly.
Yeah.
It is, subjective thing. Okay, it's the scienter, that person,
Yeah.
the guilty mind, that they actually committed the crime.
Well, exactly,
so
which is why we included the word knowingly and willfully in here.
Yeah,
To-
but you can vote, that voter can ask the neighbor to come in. Maybe that neighbor is a member of a political party and the voter doesn't know. Now that person could be guilty of a felony. So how do you solve all that? Okay, the way it's drafted is very nebulous. It's creating a lot more problems. I can just see, the General Assembly, the Attorney General taking a look at this. How can I enforce it? How can I charge this person with a crime? Okay, because there are so many defenses to this.
Well, ultimately, I disagree with you, Commissioner. I think it's very specific. So, I guess we'll agree to disagree on that point. Thank you for your feedback, though.
And just to go along as I read this with regard to the immediate family of the voter, that's if the candidate or somebody from the party is in their immediate family.
Exactly.
Not-
So if
not-
I would, let's say in a scenario where I'm a candidate and my mother asked me for help, I would be able to do that because I'm a member of the family. Again, it doesn't explicitly say who can help you. It says who cannot help you.
It's still, no, I understand. I still, to Rob's point, I like the idea of adding somewhere the unwanted assistance, because at least it provides sort of like a difference there. So I think that I'm still stuck on that. And I know that's not something that you agree, but I
Mhm.
at least you say it's sort of high bar, but I think that if we're going to start putting this into legislation, then I do think that that's the bar that we need, especially when there are members of the legislature, and we've seen it in bills that have been introduced, that they're not big fans of mail voting in general. So I think I also don't want this to be yet another hurdle that impedes access to the ballot. So I do agree that I think some language around unwanted assistance, and I keep looking at where, but yeah, that would be my feedback.
If you have a suggestion for modification, I certainly would welcome hearing it. Thank you.
So let me ask, Commissioner, are you going to move this forward for a vote?
I'd like to, yeah, unless there's a specific amendment that Commissioner Betancourt would like to suggest. I know I don't want to put her on the spot, but.
Yeah, no, that's, you can.
Well,
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Because again, I mean, it can be, this could be sub-aid, there could be a lot of things that could happen
Correct.
once it gets to the legislature.
Yeah, and I'm trying, and I know Rob left already, but I wasn't sure if there was a specific part of of Section D. This is where I'm trying to read it, of like where that unwanted assistance, no candidate, except when family present. The unwanted assistance portion is the only one that I would like to amend or add here. And you know, to the chairman's point, this can be sub-aid at some point, because I know that we also have a deadline of when this has to be introduced, so I understand the need to do it. But I'm just trying to figure out where in this sentence, it's a very long sentence, where would be the best way to put it. So
Miguel, when is the deadline?
this weekend.
There was technically a soft deadline tomorrow, but the General Assembly does take bills after that internal deadline. I know the Secretary of State's office has several bills that they were still working on. I don't believe that they're going to have in by the deadline. So they do take bills. It's just not something that's guaranteed that will get assigned a sponsor, but it is still possible to get a sponsor
So
after the deadline.
would it be a problem if we looked at this perhaps in a couple of weeks? So that Randy can have an opportunity to discuss this with legal counsel and Secretary of State and the league to
Yes.
see what the language should be.
Our next meeting is March 4th, so that's about a week and a half from now. So, and there will be legislation
I
on
was just
that
gonna say.
agenda as well, because we have a subcommittee meeting next
Yeah.
week. And then following that, the board will listen to all of the legislation that's been introduced. So the legislation will be the topic of the day for March 4th. So
Yeah.
that's certainly possible as well.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if the commissioner would also, like, would it be possible to even look at it next week? I don't know if that gives us more time. I'm like selecting little places and where to put that. Again, this is only if you're open to making that amendment. and not be
Certainly,
for a vote.
I'm absolutely open
Okay.
to the discussion and, you know,
Yep.
maybe ways we could modify this.
Mhm.
I think we were only, the reason we had this
The
meeting
soft one.
today was specifically because of the 22nd deadline, I think it was.
Tomorrow, yes.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
we're going to go past that sort of soft deadline, as you call it, executive director, then I'm happy to have it on the
Okay.
March 4th agenda.
I think that will give you the opportunity to rewrite this a little bit.
And I would ask that if any of the commissioners have suggestions,
Yeah.
please let me know,
Mhm.
because, you know, ideally that
Well,
would be,
perhaps you could share with us copies of the
The
legislation you
Massachusetts
looked at
one.
in other
Mhm.
states.
sure.
So
That would be
take-
great.
So we can examine that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It's mostly web links, but yes, I will.
if the commissioner is comfortable with it, we could put it on for the legislative meeting that's next week.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I'm comfortable with the language as it sits, but
Yeah.
if the other commissioners
Mhm.
want to see it as I mean,
Mhm.
I'd be willing to vote now, but.
Yeah. All three of you are
I
on the
leave it-
committee,
leave
so.
it to the discretion of Commissioner Giacofoni at
Yeah.
that point.
Well, I'm getting the gist that we probably would go nowhere if we did take a vote either way
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we want it, I don't know what we normally do. Do we normally send things to the legislative committee, or do they? you know,
Usually
what-
things goes with, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could send it to.
If that's
committee.
what the committee members would
Yeah.
prefer.
That works.
Fortunately, I don't think I'll be able to attend that meeting, but I could certainly suggest some modifications.
I mean,
Before that, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I think it's pretty vanilla from a standpoint of a starting point to, you know, get the language out there. And I think the language is good the way it sits, but obviously if
Mhm.
fellow commissioners would like to tweak that language, I think the place to do it is at the committee, but
Okay.
I'm open to anything the commissioner wants.
Well, I have one suggestion to put in here, that the voter has a right to ask somebody that he doesn't want and present to leave.
Mm.
That language is not in here. So the voter
It's
should
the
have that
responsibility
right
of the
to ask somebody to leave.
Hmm.
And that language should be right on the mail ballot. Okay? So the voter knows. They don't want somebody present when they vote, they can ask the person to leave.
Like to add that to the information
Mhm.
that comes with the
Yeah.
mail ballot? from the Secretary of State's office.
Good suggestion, Commissioner. Thank you.
Yeah, because then it goes along with the unwanted
Yes,
unwanted
yeah,
assistance
yeah,
portion.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Now you,
Mhm.
you established, some facts.
And it's also that, to me, it's part of like, and if somebody does help you with you not wanting to, right, or sort of just like forces themselves, or like, I'm imagining somebody, what can you do? Or who can you call? Like, what happens? Who do they call if, Mr. Giacofoni was behind me while I was taking this? To me, it's that protection of that voter, if that's part of what we're talking about.
Honestly, if that happened to me, I'm not sure who I would call either.
Right?
We're involved in
Exactly.
the
No,
process.
yeah.
Probably,
I'm like,
most
do I
people are
call
probably
up
going to start with the
WEOE?
police, I would imagine. But
Yeah. That's a great point.
I'm guessing someone from the board would get the call.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So the Board of Elections is getting a phone call.
Um,
Okay.
Whatever your pleasure is.
So do we need a motion to send it to the legislative
I-
committee?
Yeah, I
Mhm.
would think if
Yeah,
you're
let's do
going to
that.
either move support now or send it to the committee. I mean, either way, I'll be ready to vote, so.
Okay.
I'm-
Yes,
I'm in favor of the legislation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that, and I would be as well, but clearly that's not the case with the
So
members that are present.
So
So
I'll move it to.
I'll make a motion to send this to the legislative committee.
No, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And just so we're clear, that would be on next week's.
Yep.
Okay. And then is there a subsequent full meeting of the board after that? Okay,
March 4th, yes.
okay.
Mhm.
All right. Then there being no further business before the commission, I would request a motion to adjourn.
Turn, so move.
Second.
Second. All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Yeah, that will solve a big problem.
Yeah. All right,
The voter says, leave.
I am